This is ridiculous. You're in our house. I think we'll be the judge of what's ridiculous and what's not. It's my house too, you lint licker. Ah! Boys, break it up. I haven't done anything since I got here. And it's gonna stay that way. Ugh! So why did we let Professor Pragmatism in here again? And where are those henchmen of yours? Because with my neurodivergent nonsense and your whimsy, New's straight-laced logic is outnumbered. And I want to take a crack or two at these with a different balance. Besides, why wouldn't Sams be willing to help us? Was he willing to help you last video? Define willing. Ugh! Take the bat away from him. Is that gonna stop him? It's not gonna stop me. So stop whispering to each other and restrain him! Look, he helped me a lot and accepted my invitation, so let's be hospitable. At least for the rest of the video, okay? You're the boss, and appearances and hearsay aside, I think good motivations are a good enough reason to make our trio a quartet. You mean good intentions, right? They go hand in hand. Motivations are the bike and intentions are the fuel, or something. Smooth. And it really is a treat just how many sparks can fly and how many skid marks can be left on a story just by putting gas in a character's tank. It's a simple, selfish desire to be free that led Perlman to the Outer Ring. It's a desire to win that gets Faith and called out to the wastes. And it's that same desire to win that gets Billy and the player character run off the road into a hollow, where they scramble for survival, navigate dangerous ethereals, and rendezvous with the Sons of Calydon. And it's all that motivation which is going to be the star of our show. Our first proper encounter with the Sons of Calydon is during Belle's tragic funeral. Caesar starts her rounds, doling out duties to honor the fallen proxy, and at this point I'm about 40-60 on it all being a gag. Leiter doesn't seem too perturbed and takes the command to carry the casket with nothing but a note about the size of the task. It's one that's physically demanding and foundationally important to the ceremony as a whole. Caesar is essentially putting the entire funeral and the maybe not quite so late proxy's pride on Leiter's back, and leave it to the boring too cool for school type to beat around a simple you got it. But at least he's willing to look his boss in the eye. Piper's not interested in the slightest. Not that she should be. She's willing to play along with Caesar's instruction, but makes it clear that she knows that there won't actually be a funeral. The alternative is that Piper is woefully apathetic. Speaking of, I'm not letting you bash baby girl. How did you get out of the rope? Oh, please. And Burnice is just excited to shake some fire up. Her motivation is spiked down into her passion in art. Burnice's excitement comes from a rare opportunity to cut loose in a unique way. And it's a good thing Belle decided to wake up and Lucy chose to barge in when she did. The Sons of Calydon were all playing around. Well, maybe Burnice wasn't. But while Caesar walks the bit along and everyone else partakes, Lucy's not so amused and shuts the whole gag down. Her and Caesar being at odds is really important to the chapter as a whole, and our first glint of that is right here. Typically, violence is saved until after the audience gets some niceties, but when the first interaction two characters have is one hitting the other with a stick, it gets us nice and ready for the two of them to be at odds. They say an action speaks 1,000 words. It's a picture speaks 1,000 words. And actions speak louder than words. You sound like Caesar. I do? I didn't notice. But unlike her, I did that on purpose. It's a bit of a tangent, but character gags are best when they reveal something about the character they're tied to. The boss doesn't care much about the details so long as she gets her desired result. It doesn't matter that she never uses the right expression, just that everyone else knows what she meant and trusting that they do. I strongly disagree. Meanwhile, Lucy, lady that she is, businesswoman that she is, straight man that she is, rides and dies by the details, decorum, the means they use to make their way to ends, and everything being orderly. Preparing for a funeral is completely unnecessary, and, as she says, they shouldn't treat their important guest as a prop for comedy. Oh, so now you have a problem with it. As interested as I was to dig into what the other three's deals are, this is ultimately a chapter focused on these two and partially made what it is by their contrast with one another. When the Tour de Inferno comes around, Caesar is intent on conquering it themselves, and not seeking outside help, but Lucy knows the trip will be safer and more likely to succeed with the proxy's help. Just put her being a fangirl for Faith aside. Honestly, I wish we got to see a bit more of it. Back onto Caesar's interest in details, she's also quick to give away one of their biggest bargaining chips, Lucy's right to bark and nip at her, even if ultimately the player characters are too self-respecting to not give themselves up to help with the tour. With a bit of closed-mindedness, you could totally see Lucy as a brat, especially with all of Caesar's mocking. The pretense is that the Sons of Calydon have been getting unfair cuts of work. Caesar's unfazed, going along with the hand they're given with confidence that they'll get it done anyways and things will get better with a lot of hard work. It's a bootstrap mentality. Lucy, however, is completely discontent and protests against that. They deserve to be treated fairly, end of story. How the Vanquishers feel about them shouldn't impede their work. And to that, Caesar delivers a classic rebuttal. Support your argument by talking about how cool you are, and attack the other party's character. It's really easy to write that off as snark and haha, Lucy's an immature girly girl. We will not be doing that. Their job is securing the routes for the rest of the Outer Ring, so when she says Lucy won't have snacks or makeup, she doesn't mention how the transport routes don't just influence the things they can get for themselves, but the things they're able to bring back home. Lucy does want the things Caesar teases her for, but that's not selfish, it just means she's thinking about luxuries. But those sorts of things should be pretty low on the priority list. But can we falter for wanting to have access to nice things? Caesar cares much more about necessities, and rightfully so, but Lucy wants to be able to think about buying things like snacks and makeup, and for the residents in the Outer Ring who rely on them to as well, because the luxury of wanting means all of their needs are likely met. Are you sure you aren't delirious? Positive. These two standing and throwing hands at center stage are our main subjects, and the Tour de Inferno is the stage for the two of them to win our hearts. And what a stage it is! A quick rule of thumb for anybody who likes entertainment: if a legend of any kind gets brought up in a story, you can expect it to be recreated, subverted, used as a stepping stone, or shattered into a million pieces by the time the story's over. The reasonable assumption that the legend behind the main event of the chapter will be important to the development of its characters and conflict tells us we should take the imagery of the sun flint and all this rise from the ashes talk very seriously. Is anyone going to die? Probably not. This is a gacha game and no one wants their main or waifu to bite it. But even a cross-eyed goat could tell that this, with the phoenix, the journey, the deuteragonists at odds, is going to be a story about growth and change. The legend also gets to be a backdrop for Caesar's character and a punching bag for Lucy's. And the tangible influence of the Overlord position gives the goal of claiming it more weight. Caesar's still in it for the glory, but if they get their asses in that throne, they'll have the power to do even more good for the people of the Outer Ring. That's a lesson Caesar has to learn before she's actually ready to contend. And Lucy's got to loosen up a bit. The Outer Ring is a place of justice and freedom. The runaway princess is going to keep trying to do things in her own way, and who should be our knight has to shift a few gears before justice is at the forefront of their mind. And what about the others? Sure, this is mostly about these two, but we can't just write off a majority of the members of the faction. He's right. And we're not going to. Piper, Burnice, and Lighter all have side stories, so I'm not too surprised that they don't get too much love throughout the chapter. But it's not nothing. I'm still completely and utterly confused by Piper, though. There's an implication or two that she's in her early 20s or older or something, and no, I won't be entertaining that. That's a child. She's the least developed character-wise, too, so let me work a bit of voodoo magic and come up with a paragraph or something real quick. We really do have to make assumptions with her. Assumption A is that she's actually a child and has a tragic past that meant she started driving early, and took on the old Southern lady talk either as a defense mechanism or because tragedy struck so early on that she learned how to talk from the people who trained her and keep her company on the road. Assumption B, that she's anything but the youngest member of the Sons of Calydon, because this is an anime and the question marks runneth over, means our questions aren't on her quirks, personality, and what made her into the person she is today. They're on why the hell she's so small, and that is a far less compelling question to think about. You're saying it's less compelling if Piper's an adult? There are many more things wrong than her being a less interesting character if I'm expected to believe that someone that looks like her isn't a child. I guess the constant is that Piper's a trucker through and through, and while it isn't very much, keeping on trucking is pretty fitting for her. Stay on the road, roll with what the street gives you, and keep moving forward. She and Lighter are both the team's muscle. They don't ask questions, keep their minds on business, and while Piper might be a bit more passionate about the talent she contributes to the Sons of Calydon, Lighter still helps pay the bills. I'd be more impressed if he spent time actually being cool instead of just trying to act like it. We really should get around to those character stories. Caesar and Lucy are our champions of the themes of justice and freedom, while their peers capture different cocktails of the two. Lighter does justice by himself, and his freedom is in breaking free of the past. Bellum isn't quite so lucky, chained up to his record and ego because Lighter beat his ass, and going after him and the Sons of Calydon for nothing but a get-back. Meanwhile, Lighter doesn't even remember his name. One is entirely defined by the past, the other refuses to even acknowledge his, and through fisticuffs galore and some dramatic explosions, knocks that same sense into him. The fighting ring isn't fitting for either of them. Not Lighter, who's striving for freedom from his past, and not Bellum, who talks so highly about his pride. I don't know, I think it takes a lot of confidence to call a guy who whopped you handsome twice. At least Lighter coerced his foil with a bit of sense. I told you not to badmouth. Burnice is a bit of an oddball, though. Where Lighter found justice for himself and freedom, and Piper's freedom comes from her duty to the Sons, Burnice is a force of chaos. I guess the ultimate freedom is doing what you want when you want to, and being forced to do something you don't is definitely a form of injustice. It's just a loose interpretation of the themes. Loose is fitting, considering. Loose is fitting, considering how closely the other three ride their lines. Contrast is important when making a good ensemble. So a free spirit is a natural fit for the team, and naturally the best opponent to give her is a hired gun. Does what she wants when she wants versus does what she's told when she's told. It's textbook. And Burnice's existence, contradicting everything Pulchra does, makes her a more thought-provoking foil. Does she have a magnum to her head? Pet the pretty cat's tail. She's talking about dealings and justification and a scheme to save her hide? Why? She doesn't like working for those guys, so she shouldn't. Pulchra's strong and cute, and Burnice wants to play with her more, so if Pulchra feels the same, she should join the Sons of Calydon. We're dealing with a whack job. We're dealing with chaos. There's no more airtight motivation than because I want to, and with the chapter packed with morals and politics, you need someone pure to capture the soul of your themes. I'm really tempted to call the Sons of Calydon a five-man band. That's not the lesson, boss. Lighter's the muscle, Piper's the muscle, Burnice is the heart, Lucy's both the brains and the lancer, and Caesar's the hero. A spurt of useless information that we have to wrangle the audience back in from. I'm not going to pretend that you don't have a point, but why shift subjects? Can't help it. And it does have a point. It means they're all on the same page, all on the same team, all chasing the same big goal. And once the themes and conflicts start flying around, we don't have to ask questions about who our heroes are and what their stake in all of this is. You really should introduce your characters before the main conflict gets underway. You can do it the other way around, and to great effect, but once the ball starts rolling and the bike wheels start turning, you do well to minimize the number of pit stops you make. With our protagonists lined up, properly profiled, and given a bit of spotlight of their own, and now that the climax is that slightest bit closer, it's time to look at the bad guys. Not the mooks like Bellum and Pulchra, the antagonists. Well, the antagonists excluding Moors, because he's a jobber. And how do they play into the main conflict and set piece? The Tour de Inferno is a race, and a title, station of power, and giant pit of lava are waiting at the finish line. A title means there's pride on the line. Power means there's someone to undermine it not too far behind. And if the legend says the first Overlord took a dive into that spicy lake, you can bet someone else will too by the time this is done and done. If you want the prize to be satisfying, the person Caesar and co take it from has to be worth taking down. I'm talking either a monolith of a nearly ideal overlord, or the kind of bastard that makes you feel like you have a layer of grease in your skin whenever they walk into the room. Thankfully, Pompey, good name choice by the way, is the former, but that doesn't mean the latter isn't anywhere to be found. Personally, I think they go a bit too hard on making Pompey look the part of a bad guy. Black leather duster coat, slicked back hair, all those gold accents and points. Pointed necklace, pointed hair, pointed shoulders. I mean, he dresses sharp, don't get me wrong, but you might as well write villain on his forehead. And I don't know where he found a shirt that thin, but I need one. Genuinely, I thought the character designers had gotten lazy when making Pompey. And then I realized that he was a red herring. He looks the way he does for a knee-jerk. This whole time he's been built up as the biggest hurdle the Sons of Calydon have to jump, leader of the faction who've been giving them all this grief, and he was mysteriously missing for 6 months, presumably plotting something. So when we see this 7-3 battle-worn Goliath waltz up and we're chest-deep in Vanquisher territory, all black, points and studs everywhere, and Arma-freaking-Geddon embossed on his back, we're not only immediately assuming the worst about him, but when it turns out that he's a nice guy, we're completely disarmed. This, the big hurdle of the chapter, is the ideal Overlord, and Caesar's quest takes a turn, because now she somehow has to become a better fit than him. That is an order that gets taller and taller by the text box. Pompey really makes it clear that he knows what's up, can be trusted, and cares a lot about the outer ring. Caesar recognizes it too. His justice is decorum and due process, doing everything right and being upstanding to set a good example. His freedom is a sacrifice for the sake of helping his citizens live better lives. Going missing for 6 months just to fix the trade route issue, and handing the best routes over to the competition because they've been getting the short end of the stick, among a few other things, genuinely put me off. Okay, he's not faking, so where does this go wrong? That answers with the other guy. It's also with how Caesar handles the realization that she doesn't quite get the difference between her and Pompey yet. Lucy does, the on-paper parts at least. Because she's the brains and Caesar's translator. When the offer and plans are laid out, her boss doesn't quite know how to evaluate it, but the brat with the bat does. Pompey speaks both of their languages, and where the sentiment sinks into Caesar, the specifics bounce off her head. At present, she is still interested in the tour for the glory and the satisfaction, while Lucy is and has been focused on the power and the good that can be done for the Sons of Calydon if that power landed in their laps. Neither of them quite get it yet. Yes, having the title means you can secure all the best routes for yourselves, and get express access to all the funds and connections you need for whatever else you want to make meet. And while that's still off the money, she's closer to the right idea than Caesar is, but Lucy's treating the outer ring like a business. What do you expect? She's the straight man, and if the chapter's about power, authority, politics, and economics, someone's gotta come forward with a bit of... I'm just surprised it's not one of the bad guys. Oh, wait. About that fixation on snacks and makeup again. With power and influence, it's reasonable to assume Lucy would want to provide easier access to more things like that, and that it'd be on the assumption that necessities would come naturally. Lucy's right, you do need money and connections to make anything work out, but you need to understand what to use those funds and relationships for, and no matter how much I adore her, a stuck-up runaway rich girl who can't even play nice with her own teammates behind their backs isn't the girl for the job. I do love her boots, though. And brass knuckles on a baseball bat? That's inspired. We're here to talk about characters, not designs. Showing off skin where she does is a mark of rebellion. The insistence on asymmetry in the way that she does her hair, the chains on her belt, and the torn up skirt do too. There's a lot of significance in her being the only member of a biker gang that wears a helmet. And I have less to say about Caesar's design, but leaving one arm off of her jacket to flow behind her like a capelet just to add to the night motif is very nice. Okay. Caesar. Lucy's time as the star doesn't come with any change or development, but the Caesar we knew leading up to now, the one who is mostly a caricature, debatably less developed than even Lighter and Burnice, very quickly hits the road after we take her to New Eridu. Our central conflict is about a journey, and that is bound to be reflected in our heroine in some way. But if you expect Caesar to regroup, reevaluate, and leap that hurdle to beat Pompey by continuing down the highway, you must be pretty bad with directions. The way she's going isn't going to get her to her destination. Somewhere along the way, she missed a turn or something. She and we need to pull over, take a break, take a good long look at the map and course correct. Where did we go wrong? And once we find out where we are, how are we going to get to that finish line we're still so set on? Exhibit A. Welcome back. Dangerous criminal running through the streets, cops on his tail calling out for everyone to stay away from him. Our lovely knight inserts herself into the situation and bags the guy up. The crook breaks away, apparently leading the officers chasing him down an alley, and instead of turning back to pick them off and make his escape, Caesar off-screens him. Blindly inserting herself into public security matters does its share of characterization, but it's with the sentiment those officers share with her that the first revelation comes. I didn't want to, but we had no other choice. What you want is not as important as doing your duty, especially for the sake of others who might wind up suffering if you don't take action. So long as the result is for the best, potential consequences be damned. Exhibit B piggybacks off of that. Why doesn't my rope work on you? Coco, my angel, is contemplating whether or not she hates her job. Real. The two talk a lot about how the other Sons of Calydon think they pulled one over on Caesar by making her take the day off in the city, but the seed that gets planted is a lot more optimistic than the dejected look on the poor girl's face might suggest. All these burdens and negatives that come with the job don't outweigh the little things that make Coco feel fulfilled, and she's willing to live with the imperfections of the position and do her job so long as she gets to put smiles on faces. Caesar's takeaway is, quit moping and get back on the grind. But look, I'm not here to workshop things, but this segment should be about twice or thrice as long to flesh out the parts of being the leader of a biker gang that makes Caesar feel fulfilled, and to help us understand why she wants to go even further and get her influence into every operation in the Outer Ring. But I don't write these, I just evaluate them and make lessons from the meat. How far are you willing to go? What are you doing this for? And thank you, Enzo, by the way. Your 2 or 3 lines of dialogue are appreciated. Who are you doing this for? Being the Overlord means more than being the strongest. And like that, she is now closer to seeing the light than Lucy is. Let's keep going. Caesar compliments her competition, acknowledging the difference between herself and the mountain she's been so intent to climb. She agonizes over her shortcomings, how competent and impactful Pompey is, how knowledgeable and aware Lucy is, how hard Casa works for the sake of her people, and just how far she still has to go. But that doesn't blind her to her own qualification. Caesar's strong, stalwart, and has a good head on her shoulders, and now that we have a new route laid out, we can go along with her with confidence instead of worrying about exits and otherwise. We just have to be mindful of potholes. What do potholes and Lucius have in common? I'm gonna hit both of them with a car? Good man. In a minute, you two. Now's the time to set the stage for the final showdown. This is a race for all the marbles, for Caesar to prove herself as a fighter, as a leader, and as a champion of the people. Her opponent is the old guard, the person who's shown her up in every way, and the one she only just got the ability to start proudly chasing after. At her side is her muscle, champion, and right-hand ass-beater, Lighter, and the brains of the operation, Lucy, the person most fit to lead in her stead and the one most interested in her well-being. At Pompey's is... Stop, look at their eyes. Shadows half cast over Lucy's, Lighter's, and Pompey's. They're completely locked in, dead set on victory and focused on the race. Caesar's eyes are bright, wide, and completely in the light. That smile on her face tells me she's thinking about all the things that are going to come after the race, win or lose, and that her only concern right now is giving her best. There's another motherfucker smiling here, and don't think he's getting away with that. Morse's eyes are completely covered in shadows. His eyes aren't on the race at all, and we can't even see Lucius's. Who knows what he's thinking about? But that damn smile says whatever it is, it's not the race. At Pompey's is the bastard responsible for running Belle and Billy off the road, and his personality-less lackey who was the face of the listening device debacle and all the conflict that came up during the side quest with Bellum and Pulchra. Spoiler, he was and still is following the direct orders of that rat bastard Lucius. Never trust someone with a snake motif. I guess we can only beat around talking about him for so long, considering he's the actual antagonist of the arc. Anybody who grades the performances of others, and specifically the misfortunes befalling others, has a permanent place on my shit list. The driver forcing Belle and Billy off the road and into the hollow only earns a barely passing grade, because Lucius wanted to watch both parties go up in a fireball. It guaranteed the Sons of Calydon getting hamstrung, and it tied up a loose end by taking the driver he threatened into being his pawn up in smoke too. This is the story about a good of a people. It needs a selfish prick to put them all in jeopardy for their own gains, and it's fitting that they're a snake like Lucius. Snakes weaponize fear, coaxing the driver onto a you-know-what-aside mission. They use constriction, like how his explosive chokes Cinder Lake down to what's practically a puddle and threatens to snuff it out. And they obviously make use of poison, like a certain bubbly green drink that stripped Pompey of all of his natural ether resistance. They're also, notably, weak and cowardly. And while I'm personally an advocate of presenting your schemes with a bit more finesse, Lucius does actually just take the thesis of the chapter and spit it in Pompey's face. Pompey and Caesar fight for freedom and justice. Lucius wants to constrain the Outer Ring under his rule and become justice through power, and stripping others of their freedom, putting all of the gang, citizens, everything directly under his control and using them for results. Capitalist pig. And being a snake, he naturally turns tail and runs at the first sign of conflict. The explosion didn't actually take the Sons of Calydon out. He's gonna have to confront them if he sticks around. Like, engage with someone who he doesn't have absolute control of the situation over? Yeah, no, can't do that. This is the last we see of Lucius for the rest of the chapter, and, as he has been since the beginning, in stark contrast to the loud, proud, assertive Caesar and the stoic monolith of a man he called boss, he makes one last massive mess for the Sons of Calydon to wrestle with on his way out. This was always going to end with a fight between the rowdy young blood, learning what it means and takes to be the one people count on, and the old guard, and a fight it is. And even if he's corrupted, Pompeii is still the mountain they need to climb for Caesar to earn her title. He's what stands between her and purging Cinder Lake, but before it was as a competitor, who was going to do it first? And now it's his adversaries. Caesar has to beat him and do it before it's too late. Thankfully, Pompeii is the only member of the Vanquishers that actually poses the Sons of Calydon a threat. He's just an old, grey monster of a man with nothing but his bike, a sword, and determination to be the one that comes out on top, and he maintains that image even after he becomes immaterial. When a character goes through a transformation, especially if they're a big boss, you have to either capture the ideas of their role in the story or flip them all on their head. ZZZ chooses the former. They also choose to give the guy his credit. They beat him fair and square, but he kept them at bay too long, and now it's too late for them to finish the race. With power to save Cinder Lake out of their hands, Lucy dwells on their lack of options. Lighter focuses forward on the challenges Lucius has laid out ahead of them, and Caesar revs up her bike. Now the knight presents their proof of heroism. It's time for a sacrifice. Lucy says that it's enough to have each other. They can make a living wherever they want, and they don't need Cinder Lake to prosper. The Sons of Calydon have the freedom to go where they please and do as they see fit, and it's with them, Lucy's found family, that her heart is. But she's not the one who knows what it means to be a leader. Caesar's home is the Outer Ring, and it's only her Outer Ring if it's still the home of everyone else she loves. This isn't about doing what's best for them, proving herself, or securing the status and prosperity of her gang, because though they have the freedom to walk away from this and find livelihood elsewhere, they are in the minority, and Caesar's life is worth far less than the freedoms of everyone else. This is justice Lucy's unwilling to seek out for a freedom she doesn't even consider, and as she casts herself over the dwindling lake, she leaves Lucy with an example. Those geysers fire up into the sky, volcanic applause for the brash biker boss who finally reached the end of her own race, who realized how far she was willing to go, what she was striving for, and for who she chose to drive off into Cinder Lake. And with that one decisive action, cemented her worthiness of the title of Overlord, leader of the Sons of Calydon, and her identity as someone we as the audience can respect and admire. But of course she hasn't followed in the steps of the first Overlord all the way through unless she comes back in one piece. The things that bring about a heroic moment are usually more impactful for a character than the lingering consequences, but the opposite is true for the plot. I think it comes down to scale. If we're looking at the development of the person making the stride, the act of doing it, the things that feed into it, and the solidification of the person that comes out of the furnace is more important than there being a massive ripple. Now, if ZZZ's story was a lot more macro, there'd be reason to pay the consequences of Caesar's sacrifice more mind, but, well, the story that it is demands that Caesar stay alive and the focus be on her growth into a character we all want. And Caesar is definitely solid. In a story about motivation, we get to see her flourish. We watch her priorities develop steadily, and the influences of others rub off on her until that rough exterior smooths out. Though the other three don't get much time to shine here, we have agent stories to flesh them out. The four we're supposed to focus on show us a nice Punnett square of justice and freedom, and through them we have a lot to learn about creating character perspective, and making a plot where conflicting positive viewpoints can mix together and chip away at one until it's perfect. Lucius, despite being the antagonist, keeps his distance from all the conflict. His goals are against the ideals of freedom and justice completely. Pompeii is all about justice, not concerning himself with freedom so long as everyone gets the things that they need. Lucy is completely absorbed in freedom and isn't willing to go out of her way to do the right thing if it's not in the absolute best interest of the Sons of Calydon. But Caesar is both. Our protagonist is a righteous knight, always keeping the right thing to do in the front of her mind and never acting selfishly. She goes from a loud and proud glory-hunting pit fighter to a leader, and she grows in a way that's nice and easy to follow. From Caesar, we get a case study of a character learning more about the world she's always lived in until she's ready to be something more. That's something every writer needs to know how to draw from, and one every person needs to have somewhere in their mind. Mindfulness. That there's no shame in being wrong or missing points, and if you can acknowledge your own shortcomings in a constructive way, you're gonna get over them, and get on the right track in no time. Now, I'm not saying Caesar should have died. Well, I'll play devil's advocate. I can see where you're coming from with the question itself, but if she gets the permanent boot to lobby, there's an argument that she's not a character and is a device for enhancing Lucy's character and jumpstarting another arc of hers. In that case, you could put her under the same sort of label as Himiko from Honkai Impact, with a few absolutely glaring differences in the execution, the lasting impact, and the relation the sacrificee has with the person they're leaving a mark on, but you can't ignore that outcome. It'd also be kinda pointless to make Lucy go through the same arc Caesar went through. Yeah, wait, that's stupid. I changed my mind, I can't make that argument. Glad you all are catching on. Permanent death of a character isn't something you should just make jokes about. To use Himiko as an example, Honkai Impact gets away with axing her because the story isn't and never was about her. Tour de Inferno is about Caesar, and endearing us to her, her crew, her struggles, and the setting she calls home. Sacrificing her in the 12th hour will leave a bad taste in everyone's mouth. Now if Big Daddy or Casa bit it, then it's redundant. He's right. Then we have to rewrite everything so Pompey doesn't die. Ooh, Caesar can save Pompey because she couldn't save whoever we put on the block in his place. We're not workshopping stories, we're discussing them. Yeah, well maybe we should. It could be fun to do some fanfiction stuff. Just maybe.